Hey everyone, I'm Tassenix, and welcome to another mod guide video. This time we're digging into Sauvage Oppress, a very effective tank for your Sith teams in Grand Arena, even though he is tagged as an attacker. For our purposes, we'll mostly be talking about him under Darth Treya's leadership, although he does have a leadership of his own, and we'll speak on that soon enough. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dig in to the TLDR for Sauvage Oppress. His set types can be a blend of health and defense. I think that it's better to favor more towards the defense set side of things, but you can have a very competent set together of a mix of them. So, as far as arrow, circle, triangle, and cross go, I would recommend to you protection over health. He does have an excellent synergy with health, but as we'll discuss, there's a relatively budget counter involving Padme that can dismantle this whole Sith team if they're all skewed for health. So you can put a huge dent in that just by having Sauvage himself modded for a ton of protection. As far as his turn order in the team, he can be 3rd to 5th actually. It doesn't really matter what his speed is so much. You can have him at a very low base floor and have him still be effective because he gains quite a bit of turn meter in his kit. Stat priority should be protection over defense, over offense, over health, over speed. And I do have the little caveat that Sauvage gains turn meter, but keep him at 220 speed or higher. I prefer 250 plus. Some players are up around 280, even higher. I don't think you need to go quite so high. I think 250 feels like a pretty good sweet spot for being around the top 50, 100 of Kyber 1. So depending on where you are, you can be closer towards that 220 end. But I really wouldn't say it's a great idea to be too much slower than that, because that turn meter can be prevented through a couple of means. He could be dazed, he could be shocked until his next turn. Treya will cleanse that stuff off him, but until then, until he actually takes that next turn, he's going to be reliant just on his speed if he's in that condition. All right, so before we dig into his kit properly, I do want to quickly review the benefits that he might gain under Darth Treya's leadership. Compassion is weakness. Sith allies have plus 40% crit avoidance and plus 40% potency. When a debuffed enemy takes damage, all Sith allies recover 10% health. And then from her unique Lord of Betrayal, at the start of each Sith ally's turn, Treya dispels all debuffs on them and deals 5% of their max health, max of 75% for each debuff dispelled. When allied Darth Nihilus or Darth Sion are critically hit or inflicted with a debuff, Treya gains 12% offense, stacking for 2 turns. So no specific tie-in with Sauvage here. All right, starting from the base on him, his unique Brute. Whenever Sauvage receives damage, he gains defense up, a stack of heal over time, and offense up for 2 turns, and gains 30% turn meter. Whenever Sauvage is critically hit, he dispels all debuffs on himself. At the end of his turn, Sauvage dispels all debuffs on a random other Sith ally and gains those debuffs for 1 turn. So that's interesting. I was really only thinking about the unique from Treya dispelling him, but yes, when he is critically hit, that would dispel him. So to keep him locked down, shock, that type of thing, it's risky, because the next time you crit him, you're going to dispel this off, right? At the end of his turn, he dispels all debuffs on a random other Sith ally, just 1, and gains those debuffs. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. Alright, now that's just his base effect. With the Grand Arena Omicron applied, Sauvage gains 50% defense, max health, and offense, and 30 speed. At the start of the encounter, Sauvage gains 2 stacks of resilient defense, which is that dispellable form of taunt. At the end of his turn, Sauvage gains 2 stacks of resilient defense, maximum of 10, and 10% turn meter, maximum of 50%, for each debuff on other Sith allies. So he would love to see you debuff all of his friends. Whenever Sauvage is critically hit, he gains 16% health steal and offense, stacking max of 160%, and all other Sith allies gain 4% health steal and offense, stacking maximum of 40%. They recover 15% health and protection, and gain 10% turn meter until the end of the encounter. Wow. So this is what makes him so powerful and so flexible. With almost any Sith composition. So some people will use this as the tank in a Sith Eternal team on defense. You can think of a lot of Sith teams where you could see this benefit happening. Yes, Savage is the main beneficiary of this stacking effect. It's only up to a maximum of 40% health, steal, and offense shared out to allies, but there are a number of Sith compositions where this could be a big benefit, right? Principally, though, this is really nice under Trey Elite, especially when you've got Talon as an ally. The whole team's pretty nasty altogether. So anyway, yeah, you're recovering the health and protection, getting 10% turn meter. Nice. All right, while Savage has resilient defense, he has plus 50% defense per stack and is inflicted with vulnerable, which can't be prevented or dispelled. So interestingly, they give him stacking defense to ultimately reduce the amount of damage he's taking from a hit, but they're ensuring that you get critically struck when you have vulnerable on yourself. If you are getting critically struck, then you're going to have all of your other debuffs dispelled off you by the earlier clause, right? So pretty neat how that all comes together. All right. So yeah, while Savage has resilient defense, he has plus 50% defense per stack and is inflicted with vulnerable, which can't be prevented or dispelled. Whenever Savage gains taunt, he dispels it and gains 2 stacks of resilient defense. So yeah, this is the essential part of what makes him a value add in Grand Arena is this Omicron. It's really, really good. The turn meter, so look at all the stats that he's handing out to the team. This defense, 50%, max health, offense, and 30 speed. Just great for everybody that's generally under the Trey team, okay? And then he's stacking up their offense, their health steal, in addition to his own. Yeah. Everybody's gaining turn meter whenever Savage is critically hit. Think about that. He's stacking up, they're stacking stats, everyone's healing, and all other allies are healing, and all other allies are gaining 10% turn. Just nuts. So if you're fighting against Savage, you're really thinking about how to isolate him, right? Try and avoid him so that you're not continuously stacking up all of his allies and pushing them out ahead. Okay, on to his basics. Staggering Blow. Deal physical damage to target enemy. Savage has a 50% chance to inflict offense down for 2 turns, doubled if he scores a critical hit. It's a very old ability. It's okay. And he's going to be counterattacking a lot, so even though we don't put any particular emphasis on potency, reasonable chance that the offense down will apply, and if it doesn't, got it. All right. Special 1, Overpower. Deal physical damage to target enemy. If the target has 50% or less health, this attack deals massive damage and can't be evaded. So it can only not be evaded if they're at that 50% or less health. Otherwise, this attack could be evaded. That's important to know. If this ability defeats an enemy, Savage gains critical chance up and critical damage up for 3 turns, which is nice. I mean, for the most part, when you're using this character on offense, I'm just trying to do basic for the most part, and then once I see somebody's at half or less, I use this as an execute. Usually it is enough to one-shot. Some characters will have, a couple stacks of protection up or something where they're somehow able to survive that massive damage and they're just barely hanging on. That's okay. I've never found it critical that he actually lands the killing blow to get these additional buffs. It's not really about him damage-wise. Damage is what's going out to everybody else. That's okay. But yes, on offense, try and hold on to this to use it specifically for that executing feature. All right. Last but not least is his leadership. Pain is weakness. Sith allies gain 75% defense and 30% tenacity, halved for other allies. So it can still help non-Sith allies, just, reduced efficacy. All right. That said, when would you want to use this leadership over Trey's? Which brings us to team comps and turn order. So if you've seen the original Darth Treya video, which I will have a link to in the description for this video, so you can go back to it, I went in depth about some of the more popular compositions for Darth Treya and friends. The characters that you're seeing here are listed in terms of desired modded speed, not necessarily who's the leadership. So don't think I'm saying like do a Talon lead here in 5 vs 5. I'm just saying odds are Talon's probably going to be the fastest character. But yes, Treya's leadership does quite a bit, right? In addition to the stats, you know, you have the punishing enemies for attacking out of turn. They lose offense. Quite a bit of nice stuff. So when is it better to use the Savage lead? Specifically, I've found in the case of fighting against this team using Sith Eternal, Treya's lead offers no impediment to Sith Eternal. Now, you might do Sith Eternal versus Treya with no other allies. You might take in Watt. You might take in Watt in a tank, depending on how disparate the relics are in the situation. You might even take in another tank. Whatever your situation is when you're trying to do Savage versus this Treya team, it's actually the ramping damage on Darth Talon in combination with, you know, the stacking offense from Savage and the other effects in the team, making her a really potent late game damage threat. And very often, it's the case that you will find Sith Eternal and Darth Talon dueling at the end of a battle. In this case, Treya's leadership does nothing for Darth Talon here. Savage's lead can give her enough defense to, I kid you not, actually win the slap fight with Sith Eternal. That is meta-dependent. That is Datacron dependent. I want to say, as of the time of this recording here in the middle of July of 2025, I want to say maybe about a year ago, there was a Datacron meta in which, I recall my Sith Eternal very famously getting slapped to death by Brilliant Zid's Talon, and I never forgot it. Part of that was I was marveling at how little damage she was taking, and lo and behold, a good component of that was the Savage leadership. So that's about it for when I'd really consider having him be the lead. If you anticipate your opponent likes to use Sith Eternal against it, and you're also including Talon in the team, I think you've got a significant case for using Savage lead. Otherwise, yeah, Treya lead's the better way to go. Let's see. Team comp and term order wise, yeah, that's about it. This Lord Vader team's funny. At the time that I originally started this series, this Lord Vader team was something that you might see in 5 vs 5 Grand Arena, and yeah, this was before we had the Dark Side clones come out, so yeah, that's funny. But anyways, for full details on some of these ideas behind team comps, check out the original Treya video. Now, let's talk about the mods themselves. Let me pull this up on my own account. So, I say this protection modding is good for Savage because of this Padme counter. Let's talk about that in brief. Where are you, Padme? There you are. So, this courage mechanic means that when damaging an enemy with an ability, for each 5 stacks of courage, dispel 5 stacks and deal bonus damage equal to 40% of the target's max health. When you're using this Padme team, you're dispelling protection up, and for the stacks of protection up dispelled, you're gaining stacks of courage. The classic version of this counter, at least in 3 vs 3, would be like Padme, Moff Gideon, and you could use Grandmaster Yoda, you could use Shaak Ti, but some other light side, Galactic Republic support or healer is what's required to make the most of this leadership. The point is that you're essentially doing a huge stack of true damage to an enemy based on their max health. So, if you saw the video on Treya and on Nihilus, I want to say, at least for Treya, I said go with health because she has just an insane synergy for health, and I'm okay with that because her tank is Savage. And so long as you mod Savage for protection, then he's going to really mitigate that courage damage and probably discourage your opponent from trying to do it in the first place. So, yeah, aside from that, Mine's just, mine's over 260 speed. I said like 250 is a pretty great mark to aim for. I don't think you need to be much faster than that. So it didn't really cost me anything to be this fast. I'd say 220 plus again is the spot to be in. But otherwise, I'm thinking about stacking as much defense as possible. He's got a great synergy with defense, whether or not he's under his own leadership. So really like that. After that, I'd like some offense because he's stacking up a wild amount of offense. He's going to be counterattacking a lot. He can do significant damage from those basics over the course of the fight. So it's nice to have some offense tucked in as a lesser priority. You can see that I'm just about 9,500 here at Relic 9. Do you need to be Relic 9 on Sauvage? No. I think as an attacker, generally speaking, you get a disproportionate benefit going up to Relic 8. Relic 9 is a really nice, endgame pickup, but it's a pretty low priority in the grand scheme of things. So I think if you took him up to Relic 7, you're already doing very well. Relic 8 makes the most out of what you've already done, stat-wise. Relic 9 is a huge amount of health and a big amount of protection. Makes him all the tankier. But still, as long as you're observing this priority for primary stats, you should be okay. All right, as far as armor goes, I could make a bigger emphasis on defense by putting him in full defense sets, but then that's going to stress other tanks, and then there's tanks that I have that don't want this big chunk of offense, like what he's got on the cross. So it would be wasted on other people. So this is why I have that mix, actually, with health. It's the best situation for the character. But I was going to say, I could have higher defense than 70%. As a general personal rule, I don't want my tanks to really be under 70%. If I do have tanks that are, I'm generally thinking that, wow, it's a good thing that they're on a team that already offers a whole bunch of other defense elsewhere. Otherwise, I'm kind of feeling like under 70% is a bit thin for somebody who's doing the tank job, right? Aside from that, you might think, oh, Tass, you really like the crit avoidance arrows for Treya and Nihilus. Why not here for Sauvage? I truly don't think you're going to push that protection high enough to really impede those Padme people if you don't actually just have 4 protection primaries. I don't think he needs the crit avoidance as much as he needs the protection. This team, if you set it up where you're discouraging enemies from trying something like that Padme counter, it pretty much requires a Galactic Legend or pretty risky low banner counter besides. Something like that. Something that is either a Galactic Legend itself or something that you could probably use to fight a Galactic Legend. So specifically modding to block out that budget Padme counter is worthwhile. You could say that putting protection on all the members of the Treya team to resist that could be worthwhile, and I have done that in the past, but I think it is optimal for the team for the most situations to just have him in the protection. I also think I recommend that for Nihilus too, because of the way his health runs away. So protecting him for the longest time early in the game is protection. So different thoughts and reasons behind the protection modding between them. But yes, if he resists the 1-2 punch in the opening from Padme, then it will cost them too much to kill him if they kill him at all. And then time won't be on their side, and that's definitely a 2-shot for them. So yeah, a good bit to talk about here with Sauvage. Hopefully this covers for you the basics, some real thoughts behind why the modding is the way it is, and the primaries. You wouldn't be crazy to go with health if you don't see opponents running that Padme counter. But once you get to a certain point in the game, that is known, and this is probably the best footing to take. Thank you for tuning in to this video. I will be finishing up the last couple characters that go into the main body of this faction, and then we're going to move on into bigger, better things. As always, please give a like if you enjoyed, hit subscribe on the channel to see more, and until next time, it's been real, it's been awesome, it's been real awesome. Take care.